All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And here he is on the other side of the Atlantic, Jacob Prash.
Blessings in Jesus, dear friends. Thank you so much for joining us here on Catching Up with Jacob. But as we always say, Greek word to be caught up or peitzo. We're really going to be caught up when the Lord comes back. In the meantime, we prepare the way for his return. Despite the calamity we see surrounding us, despite the state of the apostate church, despite all of these things, we know that the Lord Jesus is coming soon. Let us keep our eyes on that.
Amen. Thank you, Jacob. And we're waiting to get caught up to meet the Lord in the air. Despite the difficulties, that's our hope. Amen. Thanks for reminding us. We have Jay down the freeway from me. How you doing, Jay?
It's 71 degrees, a partial cloudy here in Southern California. Beautiful day. Oh, wait, wrong show. Good to see everybody.
How you doing, Jay? Good to see you. God bless you, brother. And down under, Davey, we're going to see you soon. How you doing, Davey?
Yep, doing pretty good, thanks. Yeah, looking forward to having you visit.
Welcome back. I know you were ill last time, so people prayed for you, and prayer works. You're back.
Amen.
Praise the Lord. Jacob, you're in the UK right now. You got a couple of things going on. Fill us in on what's going on with you and a couple of things coming up.
Okay, I'm the 2nd of November. I'm scheduled to be in Newton Abbey in Northern Ireland on the outskirts of Belfast on Dowa Road with Pastor Stephen Tremble at Calvary Pentecostal Church. We have been asked to address contemporary events in the Middle East from the perspective of prophecy. That'll be on the 2nd in Newton Abbey. All of these dates are posted on the Moriel website. On the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of November, I'm scheduled to be at Agape Christian Fellowship, Orangefield Crescent, with Pastor Marty Foster in Belfast. We'll be looking at prophecy from the perspective of the book of Daniel. Daniel, highlights of prophecy from the book of Daniel. And that'll be the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The 6th, we are in the Republic of Ireland in County Roscommon at Boyle Christian Fellowship. Details are on the website. The Moriel England-Wales Conference on the 17th to the 19th of November is all filled up. We can't get anybody else in with the shoehorn. On the other hand, I am due to go to India. I shall be going to India. We're opening a new church in near Amritsar in Punjab. Marco and David Lister will be in Australia, New Zealand, and David will be in the Far East. In fact, David Lister is already in the Far East at the moment. That's why he's not with us at the present time. Meanwhile, we have some new reports from Moriel Israel and what Moriel is doing in the midst of the problems. As most of you know, we've been helping soldiers, believing soldiers in the Middle East, sending them parcels, packets, all kinds of things. Now, Israel's a strange situation. Unless you're in the regular army, the army doesn't always give you everything you need. When you come from the reserves, which is known as the Miluim, you need to bring a lot of your own things, not bullets and guns, but things like socks and razor blades and toothpaste and gloves and sometimes footwear and even things like batteries. So we have been making provisions. We've been buying things in bulk and giving it to certain brigades in the army, including the Golani Brigade and also to an Air Force brigade in Galilee who are facing off Hezbollah. In the meantime, though, we're building up a fund to give to a ministry which ministers directly to believing soldiers. And we are raising money to that end. We're putting together a financial package to give it to them in a lump sum. You can contribute to the Soldiers Fund by simply going on the Moriel website and make a contribution on the missions page to Israel and just put Soldiers Fund. And we assure you every cent, every penny, every pence will go directly to believers in the Israeli military. Just go to the Moriel website to make the contribution. And just put in the comment Soldiers Fund, and that's exactly where it will go. But the Lord has been allowing us to do this, and the reports we've gotten state that the soldiers are grateful and they understand that this is coming from born-again Christians. in Australia, in the United States, in Britain, in New Zealand, in Canada, that these things are coming from believers who love Israel, understand with the Jewish people. It is a wonderful testimony to them. And it also gives the believers in the military chances to witness to their comrades in arms. I got this from these believers in the States and things like this. They love Israel. Here's what they say. And it opens doors for evangelism. So that's what we're doing. Again, we would encourage people to seek the Lord about supporting the Soldiers Fund. But above all, we need prayer. The situation surrounding Israel and in the Middle East, in which the United States is now implicated, is very serious. We urgently need prayer. And please pray for the protection of believers serving in the Israeli and now American military. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jacob. And much prayer for the whole situation and believers. And I met some of the believers there when I was in Israel. So much prayer. As I was told by some of the believers, it's Israel doesn't feel the same. It's not the same. Will never be the same after this. People are in fear. There's a lot of fear within the people. And they know something's coming. They know things need to get straightened out in some areas, but they know that the difficulty which they face makes the whole issue, as I said, we talked about it last week, apocalyptic. They make the whole issue apocalyptic. So much prayer for them. Davey, I wanted to go to you regarding Australia and our trip there. I leave next week. I'll be with you next week over the next 19, 20 days, depending on how you count them. Anything new? I know people can go to the email address that we've been giving out, but anything else that you want to let them know regarding our trip?
Yes, look, and just up front too, look, all the meetings are free too. We've been getting a few people ask, how much does it cost to attend? Look, all the meetings are free to attend. So just turn up and show up. But next Saturday we'll be in Sydney. We'll be in 21 Fitzroy Road, Cromer. Next Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. Next Sunday morning we'll be in the Kirrawee Primary School at Alan Hodges Fellowship there, Sutherland Christian Fellowship Centre. Monday, November the 6th, we'll be in Brisbane, 2 p.m. at the Brisbane Novotel Airport. And Wednesday, November the 8th, we'll be in Perth at the Doubletree. Make sure I get the name of it. Doubletree by Hilton, Perth, Northridge, and that'll be at 2:30 p.m. A meeting then. And the meetings, they'll start in the afternoon, go through into the evening, and just waiting on a few confirmations with the last few New Zealand meetings.
Very good. If they have any questions, they can always email. What was the email again?
Yeah, email us at ccodaussnz@gmail.com.
Amen. Well, looking forward to being with you guys and traveling along with some of the believers there, Davey, and it'll be a lot of fun. At the same time, my prayer is that we can build up the body there, strengthen the believers there, let them go on with Jesus and prepare for difficult times as well as glorious times. Because although it's difficult, the Lord promises to be with us even to the end of the age. So that's I think that's it. That's all we have for announcements. Good enough. Let's get started. Jacob, let's catch up. Biden takes a stroll on the beach. He goes on vacation. The world and America is going to Gehenna. He seems to be sunbathing and taking care of his tan more than taking care of the country. American hostages are still in Gaza. Jewish hostages are still in Gaza. The world is burning. He's out of control. What is he doing? Even Jews, leftist Jews, are criticizing him. Even the people that really vote for him, which would have been the Hollywood, are even criticizing him and writing letters to the White House. What is this man doing? What is this man doing? Jacob, before we talk about the strike in Syria, what is Joe Biden doing?
What he always does: sleeps, fumbles. What does a senile geriatric patient do? Again, he's only a stooge. He's not making any real decisions. He never has. He's not smart enough. And he's not compass mentis enough. He's just a joke, and the world knows it. That's one of the reasons that villains like North Korea, China, Hamas, Iran are doing what they're doing. They know they have somebody who's an incompetent as commander-in-chief. And he's surrounded by incompetence. He's surrounded by people like Jake Sullivan, by Austin, who's a joke, and the world knows he's a joke. A politically appointed woke chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Brown. That's who surrounds him. Blinken, a lightweight among lightweights. The world knows that the Biden administration are corrupt, amateurs, and not very smart. And they also know Biden, on top of all of that, is losing his mind. This is what you're dealing with. You strike the enemy when the enemy is weak. And if the people who voted for Biden, that's what they've caused. I don't just blame Biden and his administration. I blame the people who were stupid enough to vote for him. Just look what's happened to the inflation rate. Look what has happened to the cost of oil. Look what has happened to America's standing. There wouldn't have been any withdrawal from Afghanistan. There wouldn't have, in a disaster, 13 left dead. There wouldn't have been an invasion of the Ukraine, and Hamas wouldn't be doing these things. Iran wouldn't be doing these things. Now, again, I'm not campaigning for Donald Trump. I'm simply saying if he had been president, these things wouldn't have happened. But there's enough stupid people who are actually that stupid. They reap the fruits of their own stupidity. But more than that, not only is America reaping the fruit of its own stupidity, it's reaping the fruit of its own corruption. That's what's happening.
It's not only it's not only that, but it's like the worst time to be in a war is with the worst administration we have ever seen. And yet there is a facade that they're doing something about it. So U.S. warplanes conducted major strikes on Iranian proxies in Syria. Tell us a little about that, Jacob. It's happened last night.
Proxies. It's only on proxies that are controlled by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, but it's not the Iranian Revolutionary Guard themselves. You've had like 60 Americans wounded in the last 2 weeks in eastern Syria and in northern Iraq.
Yes.
And it's just a symbolic response that really will strategically mean nothing. Yeah. It's not a big punchback. It'll strategically mean nothing. The only thing America has done of a significant military nature so far is the Navy shot down those missiles that were fired north towards Israel from Yemen. Yeah. That was significant. And there are American special forces working with the Israelis in tunnel warfare into Gaza.
Yeah, that's going to get tough.
There are reports of casualties. I don't know. The Pentagon's not reporting it. But, of course, these are scouting ventures. They're exploratory. They're reconnaissance to see what can be done at this particular point. The hope of rescuing the hostages by that means is not very good.
No,
not very good at all. And under international pressure and the stupidity of the Biden administration and Barack Obama, who's responsible for most of this, he's the one who gave Iran $150 billion, and Biden gave another $100 billion, essentially, in the pockets of Iran. Obama's warned about Israeli policies in Gaza in terms of humanitarian crisis and how it could hurt Israel. Wait a minute. The one bargaining chip that Israel had was to say, release the hostages and we'll release humanitarian aid.
Right.
But now Obama, who's one of the people who controls Biden, because Biden's too stupid and too senile, and Biden are taking that away. Now look what's happened. The amount of aid that has come in from Egypt at Rafah crossing, most of that aid, very little of it is going to the people of Gaza. Most of it is being appropriated by Hamas. They're taking it. Hamas is demanding more fuel. They've got, in those tunnels, they have 500,000 gallons of gasoline. 500,000 of gasoline and diesel. Why aren't they using that to help the people? No, they want it for military purposes.
Of course. This is a
They're
terrorist
yelling
organization.
for aid, but the aid will not go to the people. Most of it will not go to the people. It'll go to Hamas. But that doesn't mean anything to Joe Biden and Barack Obama because they're really on the side of Hamas. In effect, even though they say they're not, who funded them? Remember, Iran is the #1 sponsor of terror. Biden and Obama have been the #1 sponsor of Iran. They wouldn't have been able to do this if Obama didn't write them the check and Biden didn't write them the check.
Yeah, the U.S. government has definitely been sponsoring terror for a long time. Since the days of Obama, since the days of Bush, since the days of Hillary Clinton being Secretary of State.
Of course.
Jacob, the preparation strikes for the next stage of the war. Israel keeps talking about the next stage of the war, which by all accounts seems to be a ground invasion into Gaza. They've been talking about it for some time. Haven't done it yet in a sense. There are some reconnaissance troops that have gone in there, but not the way I think people expected it, which doesn't have to be that way. Do you think they're going into Gaza, and what would the effect be of a hand-to-hand, door-to-door looking for Hamas terrorists?
That would be a disaster. That would be a tactical disaster. You'd get very few hostages released, and you'd get heavy casualties. If there's a way to do it, that's not the way. The Israelis actually have sponge bombs, and the Americans have sponge bombs. They have ways to deal with the tunnels. The problem is if the hostages are in the tunnels.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Once you got hostages, they took those hostages for a reason. How do you give them an inducement to release the hostages?
Right.
Well, you say there's no aid unless you release the hostages. That's the only bargaining chip the Israelis have. But of course, Biden and Obama want to take that away from them.
Yeah. No,
you've got Islamic governments like Erdogan in Turkey and Malaysia saying that Israel is the culprit and that Hamas is not a terrorist organization. They're saying it.
People, in the issue of war, truth is the first casualty, and we've seen that over and over and over again. There was a report. There was a report that Israel was going to use nerve gas. Now, this was never confirmed with anything, but these news organizations that, well, they parrot things. Sometimes they parrot things. They talk about nerve gas and going into the tunnels. That would be a disaster too if they're going to go to use nerve gas, because that's if you're really going to go and get the hostage. Well, the hostage are going to get the nerve gas too.
Correct.
It's insane. It's insane, but it is a very difficult situation with the hostage and the ground invasion of Gaza.
The other problem is, let's not forget that Qatar, not just Iran, Qatar is a de facto sponsor of Hamas.
Yes.
And there's a U.S. Air Force base, a major one, in Qatar. Qatar has always played both sides. It's where Al Jazeera is. It's also where the leaders of Hamas are. They're not in Gaza.
Yeah, they live in Qatar.
They're in Qatar. Correct. So, I mean, you've got to negotiate with Qatar because they're the only ones who have any leverage to negotiate with Hamas. It's a doomed situation. A doomed situation. The only bargaining chip they had is aid. And they're being pressured by Joe Obama to give that up, as well as by the European Union.
Now, the UN has been trying to basically broker a peace deal, some kind of ceasefire, not peace deal, but a ceasefire. Do you think that's going to happen, Jacob? You think the Hamas is going to take a ceasefire? I mean, Islam is known for this kinds of, they would lie just to get their way until they got power.
But I also think that the White House would lie. They would do everything they could.
They're just as bad as the Muslims.
Yeah. Biden is no better than Hamas. He funded them. He funded them. He wouldn't enforce the Iranian embargo, and the money was gone to finance terror, including Hamas. Again, Biden and Obama made this possible. Financially, they made it possible. And in fact, some of the weapons that were left, $80 billion of weapons, who Joe Biden bequeathed to the Taliban, some of those weapons are showing up in Gaza. So again, this is, he puts on a show that we're pro-Israel and all this kind of stuff. Don't watch what politicians say. Watch what they do.
Jacob, are you saying we're funding both sides of the war?
We have funded it. It wouldn't have happened if America didn't pick up the tab.
That wouldn't be the first time, wouldn't it?
Well, again, no, it would not.
Yeah.
I always said Stalin built the Iron Curtain and Harry Truman gave him the iron,
Very true. Well, even in Vietnam, that's what happened, right? In Vietnam, they were doing both.
Of course. The North Vietnamese were being supplied by China and Russia, while Nixon and Kissinger were increasing trade with China and Russia with détente and opening the door to China while they were arming the North Vietnamese to kill Americans. Again, the White House has always been a house of treason since the Second World War. Since Truman and Roosevelt, it has always been a house of treason. Who took Egypt and gave it on a silver platter to the Soviet Union? Well, again, that was Eisenhower in the Suez Crisis. He turned against Britain, France, and Israel. That was Eisenhower made that possible. Who let Stalin build the Iron Curtain when the United States had the atomic bomb and the Russians didn't? All you had to do was tell them to get out. Well, Truman. It was Truman. Mao came to power in China under Truman. I think of the Cold War and the era of the Cold War and what Mao did and what Stalin did. No. First of all, the first enemy is what Truman did. Well, it's the same thing now. It's not what Iran is doing or what Hamas is doing or what Hezbollah is doing. It is what Obama did and what Biden did, in effect. But of course, if you tell the truth, they'll say you're an extremist. No, they're a liar.
Well, the Obama administration, this has been highly documented. Their way of dealing with terror was to arm them. That was their policy. Insane as it is, that was their policy to destabilize the Middle East. That was what they wanted to do.
Sure, let's not forget, Obama backed the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
Yeah.
He backed the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas is the military branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. Obama backed them. You had a betrayal of America by the House of Bush to the Saudi Arabians after September 11th, by Bush and Cheney. Well, the White House has always been a house of treason.
Jacob, let me ask you this. It's a question that may be worth asking. Is it incompetence? Is it just right down evil? Or is it a spiritual thing that God has given over to these people that they do not know what they're doing with something that is very biblical and prophetic in terms of what needs to happen in Israel?
All of the above.
All right. Foolish, evil, and their spirit of stupor.
Correct.
So we're not dealing with just a political issue. This is the main point that we need to clarify to everybody who watches is, yeah, we do mention political things, but look beyond that. Look underneath the surface.
Daniel chapter 10, you'll understand what's going on.
Yeah, the Prince of Persia. He's creating a lot of havoc right now.
Yes.
And the State Department doesn't know what they're dealing with.
Well, the State Department, again,
payroll.
What?
On the payroll
of the
Prince of Persia.
Remember, the Vietnam War was not lost in Vietnam. It was lost in Washington. Okay? Stalin built the Iron Curtain, but the iron came from Washington.
Yeah.
Okay? Iran is the world's #1 sponsor of terror. But the sponsorship of Iran came from Washington.
Yeah.
It's always been like that. The internal one.
Yeah, ever since the Jimmy Carter days, there was this, sort of a pleasing Iran. They always wanted to please Iran, placate Iran, do something with Iran.
What you say is true, but is that any less true of Ronald Reagan?
No, that's what I was going to say. From Carter to Reagan to
Correct.
They had this policy, which is really bizarre.
Who armed Iran? Reagan.
Yeah, he did. He sent the weapons. Well, I remember as a kid being in Nicaragua, exactly what happened with the Contras. Yeah. Yep. Now, you think the UN is going to do anything, Jake? I mean, we laugh about the UN, call it United Nothing. And I don't know, a lot of their votes may be just a show of, they're voting on something, but it really doesn't mean anything, does it?
Yes and no. Let's look who vetoed the American proposal. Russia and China.
Yes.
Now, the Israelis have been very naive and stupid themselves. It has not only been the United States. The Israelis have seen economic opportunity in China, they thought. They actually gave a management contract to the port of Haifa, Israel's biggest port.
They did. You're right. You're right.
Chinese owned company. The Israelis have been very stupid. They've not guarded their high tech close enough from China.
Well, Xi Jinping loves Israeli
China.
tech.
The Israelis have been very, very stupid themselves, not only in the failed intelligence of particularly military intelligence, and even Shin Bet. Even Shin Bet has messed up. It was not Mossad. It was partially Shin Bet, but military intelligence. Same as Amin, it's called. Same as in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. The Israelis have been very, very stupid. What was happening? Same kind of garbage you have now. The intelligence reports were not objective. They were being politically sculpted to meet the political agenda of the government.
Ugh.
That's happened in Britain. That's happened in the United States, and it happens in Israel. But Israel has been very naive and very stupid in their dealings to a degree with Russia and certainly with China, pretending that you can be friends with these people when you cannot.
No, we were talking about here years ago. Obviously a couple of years ago, but even before then, how the Netanyahu was very much friends with Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping loved to go to Israel because he loved the technology. And we're sitting here going, don't do this. Don't. It's going to come back.
It always does. Don't forget, there's two things that they're not telling you too much about. One, before this war began with Hamas terrorists were being trained by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Iran.
Yes.
Two, it was coordinated with Russia and China before it happened. Putin wants America overstretched in its capacity to supply Zelensky and the Ukraine, and then having to supply Israel at the same time. And of course, Jinping wants the same thing concerning Taiwan. Russia and China were in cahoots, in partnership with Iran before this happened. And Israel was as stupid, naive, incompetent as America.
Very true. Jacob, we got some reports here. Just confirmed them. Israel just launched a ground war on Gaza. So it just happened about an hour ago. Outcome will be a catastrophe, some people are saying, but obviously this is from the news report. Another report says Palestinian claim Israeli tanks exchanging fire with gunmen inside Gaza. This is straight from the people in Gaza. Israel has launched a ground incursion into Gaza. IDF is advancing. So we advancing toward Bet Hanun.
Yeah, Bet Hanun's in the south.
Yeah, it's in the south. Okay, so you know the area better than I do. What's there? What do you think that there's
not in the very south by Rafah, but it's south of Gaza City.
Okay, south of Gaza City. What's there that is so important? You think? Is it a strategic? Is it a place where maybe the Hamas is?
There's also a place called the Hunis. These have always been major operating centers because there are things you can do in an urban environment in terms of hiding hardware and weapons and things like this. But armies still need to maneuver. And to the degree that Hamas is an army, it needs space to maneuver. And you can't maneuver that well in an urban environment. You need to maneuver outside of an urban environment, and that's why it's there. Now, the Gaza Strip is not that big. The Gaza Strip is about the size of Philadelphia.
Oh, man.
Size of a big city.
Yeah.
That's all. It's about 40 miles long. That's all. The only thing I would say about Gaza that, again, it's something not often said, the West Bank is not historical Palestine, as the Romans called it.
Yeah.
Palestine was Philistia. The Gaza Strip is actual geographical Palestine.
That is right. That's right. The 5 cities of the Philistines, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
That is correct.
That is really interesting. Jay, what do you think of this? We've been talking about, hey, it's the incursion coming. I know the U.S. put a halt on it, saying, hey, let us get our guys in there. Let's get our troops located, our strikers located. It seems like Israel was just kind of waiting for, seemingly, in my own opinion, waiting for the U.S. to give them the green light on it. But now that it's done, what do you think?
I think, much like Sun Tzu said, you never go into battle where the enemy has prepared for you to fight them.
Correct.
And that's what Israel is walking into. They're walking into a place that Hamas has had years to set up whatever tactical advantage they want, tunnel systems, ambushes, mines, traps. That's what the IDF is going to have to slog through. That's going to be terrible for the IDF and anybody else who's on the ground.
Yeah, it is true that although you can prepare the way for ground incursion with aerial and naval bombardment, ultimately it's going to come down to a terrestrial fight.
Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it, Jacob? You mentioned that because so much of newer technology, drone technology, you still reliant on boots on the ground, as the old saying goes, right?
Right.
Boots on the ground. No matter what, it's still
unless you were going to use something like a neutron bomb or possibly Moab bombs, where you'd have to kill a lot of civilians. You couldn't contain the kind of ordnance you'd have to use to avoid a terrestrial conflict. You will not be able to limit collateral damage.
Yeah.
You can't contain collateral damage with the kind of ordnance you'd need to avoid a terrestrial conflict.
Yeah, and the amount of aggression from the rest of the world.
I mean, there's Moab, there's daisy cutters, there's things that can be used. But in an area the size of Gaza, you will inevitably kill a lot of children and things of this nature, which the Israelis don't want to do. Hamas wants to kill children. The Israelis try to avoid it.
And by the way, the terrorists, Hamas, they have exactly what they want, the optics. They have an occupying Israeli force on what is supposedly their land coming to kill them, which just plays into the narrative that they have been pushing out to the liberal media.
Yep.
So
don't forget, this is at least the 5th time that Gaza has attacked Israel. Only this time was much bigger. They actually invaded Israeli territory.
Devastating.
And fired far more projectiles and rockets. But the previous 5 times, going back to 2007, 2008, even 2006, technically, Israel always agreed to a ceasefire. And your response is disproportionate. We need a ceasefire. They did that once. They did that twice. They did that 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And Hamas has always used it to regroup, reorganize, and rearm and come back again. And this time they've come back bigger than ever with the backing of Iran. The idea of a ceasefire is absolutely absurd. That Erdogan and these villains are demanding is preposterous. The worst thing Israel can do is a ceasefire. There can be no ceasefire.
It's going to be a wild weekend all over the world because Hamas is already putting out that, like you said, Jay, that it's they got the optics. You got Israeli tanks going into Gaza, going into buildings, shooting at gunmen, what they call gunmen. Right? They don't even call them terrorists. They call them gunmen.
I dare say that this is what they've been praying for this entire time and waiting for. And Israel's giving it to them because at the same point, Israel has the same optics when they are dropping bombs from the air, except now the question is, when are they actually going to do something after expending all the ordnance that they have?
Of course, and MES NBC and the BBC, which is bias, blasphemy, and cowardice, as we say, the Clinton News Network, the New York Slimes, the Washington Compost, it's not to mention Al Jazeera, are all going to do the predictable, what they always did. That is absolutely for sure. What we have to understand, though, is it's like this. At the end of the Second World War, 1945, the end, okay, when some concentration camps have been liberated, when Goebbels asked the people, do you want total war? And they said yes at his rallies. When the Russians were about to cross the Oder River, they'd lost at Stalingrad. The Soviets were coming west. Okay. They went into total war. The total war was they were shooting V-2 rockets at London indiscriminately. This is the Nazis. Okay, they were launching them from Holland and indiscriminately launching them at London. That was Werner von Braun, who NASA needed for the American space program, or he would have been at Nuremberg. There was somebody, they gave a testimonial dinner to him when he invented the Atlas V rocket or something, and they introduced him, the man who always shoots for the stars. And it was a Jewish comedian said, yeah, he always aims for the stars, but he hits London. The total war, it was Mort Saul was the Jewish American comedian. Yeah. The attacks of the V-2 rockets on London, the British people call them doodlebugs, on the V-2. Second, the first concentration camps were liberated. They saw what the Nazis did. Third, the Battle of the Bulge. I was there not long ago. When they shot unarmed American prisoners, they shot prisoners of war in the total war. They bombed the field hospital in Bastogne. They had Belgian nurses and American wounded, and they bombed the hospital. I mean, this was Goebbels' total war. Well, when the Allies punched back, okay, and they were driven back into Germany after the Battle of the Bulge. The British shelled Hamburg. The British Navy shelled Hamburg, and the Americans and British bombed Dresden. Like the bombing of Dresden was worse than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, what they did to it, okay? And Jodl, one of Hitler's deputies, comes to Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery, and says, you're killing women and children. And he said, what? No, there was a city named Coventry that the Luftwaffe leveled, and there was only women and children there. The men were gone to war. We're not killing women and children. We're killing Germans, and we're going to keep on killing Germans until the Third Reich surrenders. Well, it's the same thing. The same rules need to apply. We don't want to kill women and children, but if you're going to use them for human shields, their blood's on your hand, not on ours.
Yeah, unfortunately, those are the ones that always get affected, are women and children.
Why didn't they say this about Bomber Harris or about Montgomery or why didn't there's always another standard for the Jews.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. Propaganda is still the same, but the narrative has changed. And obviously in our world, in our society, where there's media, social media, and literally cameras on every place you go, they're going to use it to that degree.
Hitler used he kind of distorted the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche was not a German nationalist per se, and he opposed Wagner, who was the composer. But Hitler still took bits of Nietzsche. The idea of the Übermensch, the Superman, and the Aryan race were going to be the genetic Supermen. And Hitler actually said at the end of the war, when he was losing from his bunker, I don't feel sorry for the German people, because they should be Übermensch. If they were worthy of the Übermensch, they were the Superman, they would have prevailed. He said he didn't feel sorry for his own people. Hitler didn't care about the Germans and Austrians. Well, Hamas does not care about the Palestinian Gazans. They just don't. They're like same mentality as Hitler. Same mentality as Hitler.
Yeah, I see a lot. It's a lot of comparisons. The National Security Agency has put in now an alert because of the Israeli readiness and the ground offensive, of course. And they're going to be watching, of course, many things, because the concern is possible retaliation within different countries, obviously the United States. But Jacob, before we get into that, I want to ask you, before we touch on that, do you think this is going to go into Iran, that we're going to target Iranian, not just proxies, but the Iranian actual Revolutionary Guard?
Based on Daniel, sooner or later, a conflict between Iran and the West is inevitable, I believe, as I understand Daniel. Whether it's going to be now or at some future point, that remains to be determined. But there will be a conflict with Iran, between Iran and the West. This is for sure. The other problem is the Joe Obama administration has opened the border, and with all these illegal aliens coming in, who knows how many Islamic terrorists that Mayorkas, Obama, and Harris welcomed into the country. How many cells could there be in the United States? They've opened the border to it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment, because that's one of the questions based on with Mike Johnson now, the Speaker of the House, and the funding that needs to go to these places. There's a genuine question tied into that. Before that, Jacob, the China and Taiwan, as the U.S. becomes now overextended, Ukraine, now Israel, in Gaza. And obviously the southern border, but now China and Taiwan, is China ready to strike in that direction?
Already China crashed into a Filipino military vessel.
Oh, yeah, the vessel. That's right.
72 hours ago, approximately. China is becoming more aggressive in its saber rattling. I personally think that China is not ready to go into Taiwan, but they definitely see the weakening of the United States by causing it to be overextended, having to supply Ukraine and Israel simultaneously. They see it to their advantage, and it will embolden. A full invasion of Taiwan, I'm not so sure about.
Yeah, it surely would play into the hands of Xi Jinping.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah,
absolutely. And again, courtesy of Obama, of Joe Obama, yes.
Let's talk about the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Your thoughts on him?
He's a believer. He's a saved Christian. He's pro-life. He's not a rhino. He's an actual conservative. The left hates him already. They're calling him a radical MAGA extremist and all this other stereotypes from Mess NBC and all the other garbage.
As soon as the left him, hates him, I like him.
Yeah. We need to pray for him.
Yes, absolutely.
He's the best person in the United States government right now. He's the most important person from the point of view of those who love America and who are patriots and who uphold traditional Judeo-Christian family and moral values. He's a pivotal person. Remember in Daniel 2, the Lord establishes kings. He establishes and removes kings. I consider it an act of mercy that you have a man like him as Speaker of the House. May God keep his hand upon him, protect him, and use him, because they're going to hate him. May God also embolden him. He's been quite bold so far. He stood against homosexuality. He stood against abortion. He stood against the election corruption, a lot of things. Now, I'm not a big fan of Mr. Trump anymore. He still seems to be, but I can live with that. What I hope, in my fantasy world, the Lord would remove Biden and Harris, and constitutionally, he would become the president. That would be my perfect dream.
Can you imagine? I mean, we talked about this, right? How important the Speaker of the House is, because people were saying, what's the big deal? Jim Jordan, he didn't get voted in, all that stuff. And I said, well, if you listen to what Jacob said, he's the next one after Harris.
That's right. Between after the senile corruptocrat and the bimbo, he's the next one.
And that would be that would be an act of total mercy, because undeserved. But
God removed Harris and Biden. That would be an act of mercy.
Yeah. Now, one of the questions that they asked him, he's been very bold on the IRS issue. He wants to introduce a bill about abolishing the IRS. I mean, who does that? Who does that on their first day?
Rand Paul.
An investigation. Of course, there's going to be an investigation on the border.
Yes.
In terms of what the budget is going to go for. A package for Gaza. He questions it big time. He wants an investigation on why we need one for Gaza. So a lot of positive things, Jacob. At the same time, he's handed a very divided Republican Party. As you could see what happened with Jim Jordan, what happened with some of the guys that they want to introduce, the ousting of McCarthy. They've been known for what they are now. Now it's shown for what they are.
I liked Jim Jordan. I wanted him to get the job. I like, what is it, Byron?
Byron Donalds. Yeah, Byron Donalds. Yeah.
I like him a lot. He doesn't have a lot of experience, but I like him a lot. I respect that guy tremendously.
From Arizona, yeah.
I'm 100% in his corner, and I hope he has a bright future in government. But I'm not disappointed that we have Mike Johnson. Not at all.
Right. That's right. Well, the fact that the left hate him and the rhinos hated him, it was a big thing. It was a big thing for me. Now, the open dangerous border. Let's talk about that, Jacob, because here's the CBP patrol. This is the report. This is the Border Patrol arrested 18 people alone in September on the terrorist watch list, on the FBI's top terrorist watch list, 18 of them, bringing the total to 169. By their own admission, they said they haven't been apprehended. Everybody that they believe crossed through that border, because 2.5 million people this year, fiscal year, is a lot of people, and 169 is not a whole lot. So the worst ever illegal crossing came about this past Saturday. This is, again, the CBP reported it. The feds are warning Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists likely to get through.
We have to understand the level of corruption and betrayal we're talking about. Not far from where you are, in Redlands, California. Okay? Not far from you in Redlands, right down the 210 from where you are.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You had those people who carried out the San Bernardino bombing.
Yeah.
Information about their radicalism as Muslims was available on the internet. The Obama administration did not want to scour and investigate them properly before giving them visas. It would violate their rights in their thinking. Obama let these people in San Bernardino, and they killed 14 people, courtesy of Obama.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to screen people, even though what was on the internet about them would have shown what they were. There's always been betrayal by rhinos and Democrats. Bush engaged in betrayal when he continued the express visa program for the Saudi Arabians. Obama engaged in betrayal. For the San Bernardino bombing, it's at his hands. The blood is on his hands. And what's happening now at the border, who knows how many may have gotten in? Radical Islamic terrorists, not to mention narco terrorists and the rest of it.
Yeah, that's
And why should Obama and Biden and Mayorkas and Garland not be held accountable?
Oh, I agree. Jacob, listen to this. This is CBP reports. This is the resources. There are over 1.6 million known getaways at the southern border. 1.6 million. Border Patrol leadership testify. This is what they testify. They estimate hundreds of thousands unknown getaways that they never saw or detected. Now,
not only that, when Homeland Security wanted to increase the budget for the border, they wanted to increase the budget to expand the processing system of apprehending people, then letting them go. Not to keep them out.
Yeah. All they had to do is go on that app, and you just fill that app, and you just can go through. Jay, we don't live too far from this melee here. Obviously, Arizona, Texas is being overrun, but we have a border not too far from here. What's your take on this? This is, I mean, we're not trying to be alarmist, but you have to be alarmed at the numbers.
I mean, the radicalization that you're seeing in the universities, we were talking about this earlier. I think that an outright terrorist attack on the United States is not the play that they necessarily want to do. I think they want to gin up support in America for their cause. And they see in America the level of discontent. That is something that they can feed off of. And it's the same with who's coming over on the border. It's not only, we can talk about the few Chinese, we can talk about the few that are coming from overseas, but let's talk about the socialist countries that are sending people in mass to the United States. Yeah. I'm talking about Argentina, Venezuela. Yeah. These are people that do not understand, like, they're used to a banana republic.
Yeah.
And America is moving closer and closer to that already. So it's like they're coming to something they know, hoping for something different. but we're slowly being turned into that by the way you have collusion between the media, the government, between big tech and the government. I mean, we're so close. I mean, why even vote at this point when everybody is a citizen that makes it across a border?
Yeah, that's what they want, and we can mention his name, but we'll mention his name at the in backstage. But there's a certain organization that rhymes with Oros that does a lot of things, and if we were to mention his name and his son's name, by the way, because his son, the apple didn't fall too far from the tree, are heavily involved in trying to bust borders, bring a radical thinking of the day, destroy any sort of semblance of civility or society, especially the Judeo-Christian world, even though himself is a descendant of, let's say the Jewish people there. So quite a Judas, a Judas.
He uses the protection of the ADL at the same time he destroys everything that his cultural heritage should represent.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he was very happy about getting after Jews in the, let's say, in the World War II. Let's say he was around at that time, and he did some things. So go ahead, Jacob.
The ADL, B'nai B'rith, is a disgusting organization that has betrayed its mandate. Greenblatt, its present director, and his predecessor of Volkswagen, I think his name was, a complete hypocrite. He pandered to the left. He pandered to Soros. He turned the ADL into a platform for left-wing politicking and tried to identify that with the purposes of the ADL, which it isn't. Now the same Greenblatt is standing up complaining about anti-Semitism when, in fact, he pursued the left-wing agenda that sponsored the resulting anti-Semitism. It's coming from the left, and he sponsored the left.
It is one of the bizarre.
Of the ADL. It was not the purpose of the ADL. But if I guess maybe if somebody like someone, hypothetically, like Soros, were to make a donation to it, what's he going to do? Greenblatt is a reprehensible hypocrite.
I was going to ask you about that, Jacob. Are Jews on the left growing disillusion with the left now because ADL is supposed to?
Okay, I've always said this. Okay. A student who votes Democrat, and I'm not a Republican now, I'm an independent. A student who votes Democrat, when he goes into that booth and pulls the lever, he says, I don't deserve a future. Click. That's what he's saying. I don't deserve a future. When a black person goes into that booth and votes for the party of slavery and Jim Crow, when he pulls that lever and votes Democrat, a black person is saying, yes, boss, how's it coming? And when a Jew goes into that poll booth and pulls the lever, he or she sews a yellow star on their jacket and pays their own airfare or their own train fare to Auschwitz. That's what they do. Now, some of them are waking up and realizing, why is Chuck Schumer and Blumenthal in the same party with the squad? How can you be in the same party with the squad? It's mainly the Republicans who are pro-Israel.
That's right. That's right.
The Democrats are divided over it. Republicans are almost, not solidly, but overwhelming majority of Republicans, and I'm not a Republican, are pro-Israel. The Democrats are divided down the middle on it. Now, some Jews are waking up and realizing what kind of scum people like Schumer and Blumenthal are. And how stupid they've been. Some are, but some will continue in their stupidity, particularly those who will continue to fund Biden, like Moskowitz and Katzenbach and these people. Many of the big funders of the Democratic Party and funders of Biden you'll watch are going to be Hollywood Jews.
Well, yeah, you got Spielberg was meeting with Obama just a few weeks ago, just trying to, up the ante on the election of the Democratic election for next year.
Spielberg, you made Schindler's List. Why don't you make a movie called Swindler's List, starring yourself and Joe Biden? Why don't you sew a yellow star on your own jacket and pay your own train fare to Auschwitz? Because that's what you're backing, the Democratic Party, the party of the squad.
Yeah. I mean,
Look, you're a great filmmaker. You should stick to making films and let other people stick to the way the government should be run.
Bernie Sanders got the squad really riled up against Israel. I mean, this is Bernie Sanders. He's got the squad riled up for years. This is at his feet. This is exactly what he's fomented, an anti-Jewish, himself being culturally Jewish, against Israel.
You know, the most anti-Semitic, the most dangerous anti-Jewish people in the world, Soros, Sanders, it's Menlaus's, the traitors from within their own ranks. You know who Menlaus is? He was the Jew
the Maccabees
at Hanukkah. It's always been the enemy within. Menlaus's. They're the Benedict Arnolds of the Jewish history.
Of Jewish history. The ADL.
And Bernie Sanders and George Soros are two of them.
The ADL, no word on them, on what's going on with the attacks on Jews, on Israelis in the United States. Not much. They supported BLM. They supported Antifa. They supported these groups who are now turning against the Jews. And there's a deluge of stories and columns that have been published regarding this stuff and the barbaric attacks by Hamas. They said nothing. Now they're seeing their people being attacked here in the Western world. What are they going to do?
Hey, Greenblatt, BLM put out a poster commemorating and celebrating the people who landed with the motorized hang glides and killed 260 Jews at the music festival, and they celebrated it and endorsed it. And you back BLM, and that's what they're celebrating, Hamas. That's you, Greenblatt. Now, are you going to have the integrity to resign? Of course you won't, because you don't have any integrity.
Yeah, he's waiting for that a greenback that's coming from Soros.
What they don't understand, and I think what BLM does understand, is that the fact that you have, Jews are God's people, and they've claimed that for 4,000 years. And to BLM, to Islam, that is blasphemy. Because BLM thinks that they are God's gifts to the world with their enlightenment, and Hamas and Al Qaeda and every single Islamic terrorist group thinks that they are the enlightenment that needs to come to defeat the oppression of the chosen people. And unfortunately, that's the case. That's the root of anti-Semitism. Is God said, "You are my people. I love you." And everybody else said, "Wait a minute. That means you don't love us."
I'll put enmity between you and the woman.
Yeah.
Right back to Genesis 3.
Very good. Very good. No, Jay, you're absolutely right. This is some of the statements, Jacob, come out from BLM. This is BLM reposted on their pseudo government help that they want to become their pseudo government on their own. They think that their own government is BLM. To every Jew from the Jordan to the sea. This is what the BLM is pledging: solidarity and resistance against the Jews. 57 years of settler colonialism and apartheid. These are direct quotes from BLM, which the ADL have supported, backed, and in many different ways. Now, from the river to the sea, just for our viewers who don't know that, what do they mean by that? I know we know what they mean, but what do they mean?
The utter destruction of the state of Israel from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. They don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution, and that state will not be Israel. That's what they mean.
That's the three no's, right? No peace with Israel, no recognition.
How can you negotiate with somebody whose charter demands your extermination as a nation?
Yeah. How does the ADL even align themselves with solidarity and resistance against against their own people? Again, Greta Thunberg comes out, stands with Gaza. What does the ADL do? Because of the climate change policy, they stand with Greta Thunberg.
You know what? When she was a minor being manipulated by the political left, she was just a minor being manipulated. She's no longer a minor.
No.
Now she's a vulgar idiot.
Yeah. Calling for, she wants an immediate ceasefire and justice for the people of Gaza. And she never, when they ask her about the Jewish innocent people as hostage, she says she didn't know about that. She didn't know anything about that. I mean, obviously she's
she's a vulgar idiot.
She's been informed. Now, Jacob, these left-wing Jews who heroes are like Obama, Sanders, and Biden. Now, are they going to back? Are they going to back Hamas on this? I mean, they have a really serious choice here.
I think most of them are stupid enough and self-hating enough to continue to vote Democrat.
Oh, man.
Some of them will not.
If I may, Marco,
yeah.
I just wanted to say there's a precedent for the ADL in history. During the time of the Nazi occupation of Poland, when they needed to round up the Jews to put them on the trains, they made a bunch of Jews become police officers.
Yes.
They gave them a yellow star and a baton and said, put your people on the train, and you'll be the one that is treated nicely, and you'll be the last to go.
Oh,
and many people step forward to do it.
In hopes that they would treat them nice, in hopes that they would treat them unbelievable self-preservation.
Hope that the crocodile will eat you last.
That's it. That the crocodile will eat you last. Jacob, before we finish, because we're an hour into it, and we're going to take some questions on Rumble. By the way, we thank you, those who are watching and are live with us, and those who will watch later from many different platforms, from Rumble to Memorial TV to Memorial.tv to RTN to MemorialTV.org to Telegram, but also YouTube and Facebook. We will be leaving those two platforms and going into Backstage on the other platforms. So you want to switch over now, ask questions on Rumble. We'd love to take your questions. We have some incendiary, let's say, Backstage with the persecution of Jews and Christians. We'll be talking about that. And also it's coming from a lot of young people. And we'll play a couple of videos of how young people think today, and what's any hope for society when the young people that have been grown up in society and school for the last 20 some years are now the voters, now the workers, now the ones that are marching against the Jews and against anyone who supports the Jewish people. So we'll be talking about that in a moment. Jacob, real quick before we finish this, this situation reminded me of the domino effect of World War I. Yes. I'm not saying World War III is right at the doorstep or anything like that. It's seemingly we're heading to a major war. But what was trouble was the fact that these, what they call linchpin events that gave one to another, became a domino, and nobody could stop it. Nobody could stop it. And we have history as our ally today because we can go back to what happened. But at the moment, nobody really understood the tragic series of events, series of confluence or coincidence, whatever you want to call it, that triggered this.
Yes,
into a horrible war. And you talked about World War I as one of the most horrible wars. I mean, trench warfare was absolutely horrible. People died in the millions in the UK, France, you name it, Germany. I think there was one war that Germany lost 400,000 men just in one war. One battle lost 400,000 men. It was absolutely terrible. But obviously the cause of the war, as history shows us, was the assassination of France, Archduke of Hungary. Franz Ferdinand. Serbian nationalists killed them. That led to, of course, countries taking side. And of course, the dominoes came down at that point. Austria declared war on Serbia. Russia took Serbia's side. Germany declared war on Russia.
Agree. The Middle East, analogously, is a powder keg akin to the Balkans.
Okay. So once Germany attacked France inside Belgium, then Britain got involved, then Japan got involved, eventually the US got involved. Yes. All these treaties so I looked up all the treaties. So let's be fair and honest about it. Iran and Lebanon. Where do you see that one going? They have a treaty.
Well, no, Iran has political influence in Lebanon via Syria, but Iran has direct control over Hezbollah.
They do.
Powerful military and political force in Lebanon.
So they have a treaty, and I don't know exactly how the treaty would work if they were being attacked, but Iran has a lot of influence, but there's no doubt that militarily, because of Hezbollah, they controlled militarily the area of Lebanon.
Lebanese military couldn't stop Hezbollah if they wanted to.
Exactly. So if Lebanon is attacked, Iran gets involved?
Iran will always look for its own interests. I think Iran does not really want a conflict that it can't win. I think they'll be involved, but I don't think it'll be an out-and-out war shooting the United States. I don't think that would happen. I do think that they would use surrogates.
All right. So Iran and Syria have a mutual defense agreement since 2006.
Yes.
So what do you think that's going to go? Obviously, as Syria get the brunt of the attacks because of the proxies.
It is Iran, Syria, Russia, China. They're all coordinating on one side.
Yes.
The West, Israel, coordinating on the other side.
Yeah.
That's how.
What about this one? Iran and Yemen with the Houthi rebels going after, of course, the Saudis, but they have been launching also some rockets. Obviously, the U.S. intercepted them, but
Yes.
Where's that going to go?
Well, this whole thing with the Houthis has gone on for some time.
Yeah.
And the Saudi Arabians are not very good fighters. They're not, despite the amount of money they spend on defense, and the American backing, they're just not very good fighters. That's one of the reasons they wanted the help of the Israelis. And that's also one of the reasons why they acquiesced to a rapprochement with Iran brokered by China. Okay, they're just not that good. They never have been that good. Other Arabs have been better, but the Saudi Arabians have never been good fighters, except against each other.
Yeah. Well, they do, and they don't have a high view of the quote unquote Palestinians either, right, Jacob? They don't have a high view.
Of course not. The Palestinians are a football in the Arab world. Syria, Lebanon, and not least of all Kuwait have all had major pogroms against the Palestinians. But the biggest was Jordan in Black September. Jordan slaughtered between 15 and 18,000 Palestinian Arabs, so-called, in 12 days in September of 1967. So Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Kuwait have all had major, very violent conflicts with the Palestinians. I mean, genocide of proportions.
Yeah,
Marco, I just wanted to bring up something about Saudi Arabia real quick, something that I said to you.
Absolutely, brother. Go ahead.
As you recall, Saudi Arabia put in a ban and for all their imams. None of their imams in their mosques in Saudi Arabia are allowed to pray for the Palestinians.
Whoa. Very interesting. Very interesting. That tells you how much they despise the Palestinians. You know, what did you call them, Jacob? Nobody wants them. Nobody cares for them. And after all these years, they're still refugees and never given a land.
Here to blame the Jews for the plight of the Palestinians than it is to blame themselves.
That's true. Jacob, Iran, Russia, and China, they have a triangular alliance. That's what they call it. It's not only just economically through the Shanghai cooperation, but it's also militarily. They have an alliance. And so obviously they're at least Russia and China are in the BRICS, but they are designed to weaken the U.S. and NATO and the global influence. That's their point. That's their existence. Do you think there would be any sort of conflict with Iran? If there's any kind of sort of conflict, obviously Gaza already started, but if Iran gets involved, that Russia and China would come.
I think that China is more concerned with Taiwan. Don't forget, they just had a collision with the Filipino naval vessel a few days ago. Okay, so China is more concerned with Taiwan. Now, it has an interest in what happens in the Middle East, but its own strategic concern is Taiwan. Putin is bogged down in the Ukraine. So the answer is they would play a role in it, but they would not risk another war. Putin could not handle a second front. And China's too far away and too preoccupied with Taiwan.
Very good. Very good.
Don't
It's
forget,
interesting.
something happened. If something happened where China got involved in the Middle East in conflict with the United States, the U.S. Navy could very easily close the Straits of Malacca to China. That would cripple the Chinese economy very, very seriously. The U.S. Navy could close the Straits of Malacca very easily.
One more thing, Jacob, is the Turkey. They have vowed not to work with Israel anymore on energy projects. Erdogan is actually holding a big rally tomorrow in Istanbul or Ankara. I think it's Istanbul. And because of the Gaza incursion. So he seems to be more of a cheerleader than anything else. Do you think he's going to do anything in particular to get Turkey involved in this? He's definitely very pro-Palestinian, probably more than other leaders. Perhaps just by words, but he definitely has a lot of influence in Jerusalem with the Palestinians there.
He has two interests. When it became obvious that Turkey was not going to easily get into the EU due to Greek objections, okay, his two interests are as follows. One, his economy is in serious trouble. Okay, it's in serious trouble. And largely due to his policies. His other interest is he wants to Islamize Turkey. It's an Islamic country, but not a religious fundamentalist one. He's trying to bring Turkey in more of a fundamentalist direction, away from the original ideas of Ataturk of secularism. He wants to make it more of a religious country. Why? In other words, Japan had been a Shinto country, okay? A Shinto country, till MacArthur rewrote their constitution after the Second World War, where there was a separation between Shintoism and government in Japan, okay? Well, Turkey was to be the same way. Islam was to be the religion, but the government was to be secular. Erdogan wants to reverse that. He wants to bring about a rapprochement between Islam and the government. Why? Because he has ambitions, delusions of grandeur, of, to some degree, resurrecting the Ottoman Empire. During the Ottoman Empire, Turkey controlled most of the Arab world. Not all of it,
That's right.
Certainly the Middle East. He wants to make Turkey a major player in the Muslim world once again, and most Muslims in the Middle East are Arab. So therefore, he has to do what he's doing. Remember also that when the Ottoman Empire existed, the Turks subjugated the Arabs. They colonized.
Yeah.
Many people don't realize that the Kaaba, the stone in Mecca, the Turks destroyed it. The one you see now is a restored one.
Is that the Ottomans who destroyed it?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know they did it. I know it's been rebuilt, but I don't know who destroyed it. So he has energy deals with Israel. I don't know if he wants to sacrifice those, but he is definitely slammed Israel for their retaliatory attacks, which really he doesn't take into account the attacks on Israel at all whatsoever. But I think he might be an important figure there, Jacob, because he has a large army.
Very large
army, yeah. And he's obviously right in the middle between Asia and Europe. And he basically controls that doorstep into Europe by the immigration.
Don't forget, the Israelis do have something they can do to Turkey if it ever got that serious. The Israelis could arm the Kurds.
Yeah, that's it. And they're involved in another scrimmage, right? Which is in Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Correct. That is something that Erdogan has to take into account. As far as the energy non-cooperation, the Leviathan oil fields and other projects in the Eastern Mediterranean, of which Israel is involved, Israel only needs the Greek Cypriots in Greece. It doesn't need Turkey.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So much to say. We're coming down to the end of catching up here. Much to say about the invasion in Gaza. We'll see how that plays out over the next couple of days, because we're heading into a weekend here in the West and here in the United States, a few hours from closing time for a lot of people to go home. Jay, you think we're going to see some major protests this weekend? I mean, if we saw them with in the NYU and in New York and here in LA, we saw them on the fact that just Israel was even thinking about going into Gaza. Now that they've gone into Gaza, what kind of retaliatory protests do we expect this weekend?
I think we can expect many protests this weekend. And I wonder how many people are going to be brave enough to counter protest them, considering how violent these protests have been.
Oh, yeah. Against Jews, against Christians, universities. We'll be talking about that in just a few minutes on Backstage. So did we have a comment? I thought we had a comment from online. I just wanted to, what was it? The one about, was it about the missiles, Davey?
Oh, yeah. Somebody mentioned they wondered if the Middle East should be renamed the Missile East.
Missile East. Yeah. Thank you. That's pretty good. Missile East. Well, it's been the Missile East for some time now, and it's just become hotter than it's been in a long time. So lots of protests, I would imagine, this weekend, Jacob, in New York and Philadelphia, down in major left-wing cities. I could imagine that the
ground incursion may give it a boost. But what tends to happen with these kinds of protests is they tend to wane. First is a fury, but then they tend to wane unless something gives them a boost. And a ground incursion could give them a boost, yes.
Yeah. And that's my concern over the weekend. So very good.
The police in America and Europe needs to crack down on rioting Muslims and left-wing student activists. They need to crack down. This is going to be, if you're marching in support of terror, that should be an arrestable crime.
Yeah, I think there's some Republicans who've been saying that if they're protesting on the side of terror and they're not American residents, they should be deported.
It'd be nice if they were put on a watch list rather than Christians that love their country.
Why is Christopher Wray looking at Christians over this weekend instead of they're still on the watch list? They're not putting pro terrorist protesters there.
No, it's like the way the left wing media criticized Trump. They called it a Muslim ban when he was right. And again, a lot of this goes back to the betrayal of America by the Bush dynasty after September 11th. Not getting rid of these people.
Well, I mean, the chickens have come home to roost to a large extent. So let's finish there on catching up. We're going to be jumping over to Backstage. So send in your questions on Rumble. We'll ask the questions. We'll have a somewhat of extended Backstage, since we didn't do one last week, and talk about the things that we can talk about on YouTube and Facebook. We won't be on there for Backstage, so you got to jump to the other ones: memorialtv.org, memorial.tv, RTN, Vimeo, Telegram.
Marco said, sorry, Marco.
Go ahead.
We encourage our viewers on YouTube to please watch us on Moriel.tv, MorielTV.org, or on Rumble. Watch us on an alternative platform. Do not watch us on YouTube. Please watch us on Rumble or one of our own servers, our own platforms, Moriel.tv, MorielTV.org. But don't watch us on YouTube. We don't want you to watch. We want you to watch us, but ideally not on YouTube. We need to put ourselves outside of the clutches of those terrible people.
It does seem like YouTube likes certain videos, and they don't like certain videos, and they don't like certain topics to talk about. And we've been certainly on the brunt of their hypocritical bannings.
Yeah. It's not like that. There's Islamic organizations, even governments like Turkey, and certainly the government of China, that'll use robots and massively protest certain videos that a computer program at YouTube will pick up on and say, we're getting all this many complaints, when it's not even people complaining, it's simply robots.
Yeah, they can tell. They just let it go. All right. Well, let's go jump over to Backstage. Thank you guys for watching, catching up here on YouTube and Facebook. We won't be on there in a few minutes, so you have to jump over to the other ones. Rumble, we're asking the questions. You can send the questions into Rumble there. Davey will field them, send them to me, and then we'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.